Welcome to the Kino Cave, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. As I mentioned in my Into the Spider-Verse video, Spider-Man's an extremely important character to me and meant a lot to me growing up and still does today. I relate to him even more so now than I did when I was a kid. So naturally, I was very excited for this film, seeing a plethora of Spider-Man characters from across the multiverse of Spider-People, a lot of them coming in from other films and comic books and media. And this film definitely didn't disappoint on that front. To start out, I had a horrible theatre experience. The people behind me were constantly having a running commentary going, commenting on everything that happened, slurping their drinks and just making a lot of noise, and it was really distracting and really annoying and may have affected my enjoyment of the film. So I will definitely have to see it again at some point to see if my opinion changes. With all that out of the way, I did not love this movie, which I know is going to be a real hot take because I've been seeing all over the internet people giving this 4.5 or 5 stars. I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd. Really, it should probably be a 4. I'll see the movie again in a more comfortable environment, maybe at home when it comes out, and I'll see if my opinion changes. Probably it will be bumped up to a 4, but my theatre experience definitely didn't provide any negatives with the film itself. My negatives with this film will always stand. It might just be my horrible theatre experience increasing those negative feelings, but I can't shy away from the things that this film gets wrong, because it does get a few things wrong. Across the Spider-Verse follows Miles Morales as he travels through the multiverse with Gwen Stacy and meeting a whole plethora of Spider-People from across the multiverse, including Miguel O'Hara, who's Spider-Man trying to keep the multiverse intact from aberrations that are popping up all over the place. So to start out, the animation in this film is truly breathtaking. It's incredible what they've managed to do. So much time and effort has been put into this. The different Spider-People being animated differently, it looks absolutely seamless. Gwen Stacy's universe looks amazing with all the colors and the watercolor feel to it. Miles' animation is still really great, and it's carried on from Into the Spider-Verse. The animation for all the different Spider-People, Spider-Man India has his own animation style going. There's different styles coming in through different universes. Most impressive of these animation styles is Hobie Brown, is Spider-Punk, voiced by Daniel Kaluuya, which I didn't find out until after the movie, and holy crap, I love Daniel Kaluuya so much. Spider-Punk's animation is incredible, especially for a character that's in the movie quite a bit. He looks like a sticker in every single shot. The blend of 2D and 3D and the way the style shifts as he moves is incredible. Even doing a frame of that must have been such a grueling task for the animators, and it paid off in droves. I couldn't praise the animation enough in this movie. In the opening of this video, I just realized that my window was open, so some of the audio from the first few minutes of this video might be a little bit choppy, but close the window now. It's getting progressively hotter in this room, but we'll power through. It can almost get overwhelming, the animation in this movie. It's excellent, but it's a cluster sometimes, especially in scenes with multiple Spider-People. It can get very overwhelming for better or worse, but I tend to forgive that, especially considering the amount of work that has to have gone into animating each frame with multiple Spider-People with multiple different animation styles. It's incredible what they've managed to do, even if it is a little bit overwhelming to the eyes sometimes. As well as the animation, the music and sound design is incredible. It's not as good as the first film, I feel. I definitely think that they didn't use the music as well as they did in the first film, but it's still really good. It's still there. The theme for Miguel O'Hara is especially great. I love the sound effect that goes along with him in each action he does. Of course, when you're doing a multiverse movie, I think it's a given at this stage that you have to do a little bit of fan service, because you'll get yelled at if you don't, and you'll get yelled at if you do, so you may as well make more people happy than not happy. So of course there's a lot of fan service in this. There's a lot of different Spider-People that we've seen from previous media. I'll not spoil it in this half of the video, I'll get to it in the spoiler section, but I was very happy to see a lot of Spider-People from other media come into this film. It was a joy to see them. Getting into my negatives of this film without spoiling anything, The story and characters, unfortunately, are not as good as the first movie. So, my issues with the story lie mostly in the pacing. I find that a lot of characters are introduced, given something really good to work with, and then completely forgotten about in favor of other characters. Especially with the main villain, I guess, in The Spot. He comes in, I was really digging it, and then he just comes right back out again because we need to start focusing on Miguel and Miles and Gwen. Similarly, Gwen has a really, really solid opening. Loved it. I was loving it for the first 20 minutes of this movie. Then Miles comes in and Gwen kind of starts getting left by the wayside in favor of Miles's story. And then Gwen's arc comes back at the end and it doesn't really feel as earned, I feel, because she was basically forgotten about while we had to focus on Miles. I don't mind any of these things being in the movie. I thoroughly enjoyed Miles's arc and Gwen's arc and the Spot's arc. I loved everything to do with these characters in the movie. It was just really paced strangely. And I know that this is the first part of a trilogy, but I feel like a film should be able to stand on its own as well as be part of a series. And I find that the arcs in this movie, it's just not paced very well. I think that they should have broken up these different character arcs a little bit better. There's a lot of exposition in this movie, and some of it's handled quite well, using the animation style and the concept of the multiverse to visually explain different story beats to us, but a lot of the time it is just Miguel O'Hara screaming exposition at Miles, and I started to check out after a while. Another issue I found with the characters, there's a lot of Spider people in this movie, much more than Into the Spider-Verse. And one of my issues with Into the Spider-Verse is that some characters like Penny Parker and Peter Porker and Spider-Man Noir, they were just in the movie to be in the movie. And while I think that paid off, especially with Spider-Man Noir, because it's Nick Cage and he's amazing, I found that, especially with Penny Parker, she was given very little to work with. She wasn't really charismatic or fun enough to justify being in the movie, and she didn't really have much of an arc. Or at least it wasn't developed enough for me. And unfortunately, this film adds even more spider people in there that weren't in the previous film and tries to give each of them things to do, and I think it kind of falls flat. Maybe we should have focused a little more on characters we saw in the first movie, or at least just given characters like Jessica Drew and Spider-Man India a little bit more to do. I found that they were just kind of just in and out. And with Jessica Drew, she's kind of in, and then she's out, and then she's back in, and then she's back out. I never really got a good handle on who Jessica Drew was, and I found that that hurt the film a little bit, because we kept seeing these characters and not really learning anything about them. Like, Jessica Drew is awesome, and she rides a motorbike, and she's pregnant, and that's really cool. But that's it. You know, there's nothing really outside of that. There's no more to that, which I felt kind of hurt the movie a little bit. And you see this as well with Spider-Man India. He's pretty much just got his one personality type, and that is it throughout the film. In fairness, he gets more than Jessica Drew, but he faces the same issues. As well as Spider-Punk, although I can kind of forgive Spider-Punk because his whole deal is that he's ambiguous. So you can kind of forgive it with him, but with some of these other spider people that keep popping in and out, there's more, I just can't think of them, and these are the ones that are prevalent in all the marketing, and I try not to spoil things in the first half of this video. I'll discuss a lot more of my positives in the spoiler section. I find it really hard to talk about all these things in a non-spoilery way, so I don't want to sound mean to the film. I did really like it. It's at least a 3.5 out of 5 for me, as I gave it on Letterboxd. I think that that is very fair, considering I'm very much a story and characters person. I'm always substance before style when it comes to movies, and while I can really appreciate the animation in this movie, I think the style is excellent. I think the animation is gorgeous. I appreciate the amount of effort that all of these filmmakers put into this movie. I just can't get over the weak storytelling and a lot of the characters just kind of coming in and out. And there were a lot of character arcs that were getting shelved as well. So, this is a spoiler warning for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I'm about to get into spoilers for the movie. A lot happens, and if you care about spoilers, if you haven't seen the movie, I would absolutely recommend that you go out and watch it. It's definitely worth the price of admission, so you have my recommendation. Go see this movie and then come back and watch the second half of this video and you can hear my spoiler-filled thoughts. So one thing I really wanted to talk about with this movie is the ending, and how this movie handles being the middle part of a three-part story. I found that the ending of this movie, ending on a twist that Miles is in the wrong universe and that he's in imminent danger, and then Gwen setting up her own spider team, and then just cutting to black and saying to be continued, I found it to be far too abrupt. I found it seemed like the film either had to be 10 minutes shorter or 10 minutes longer. And I've been seeing a lot of discourse online about this very topic. People who are defending this like to bring up movies like Empire Strikes Back and Back to the Future 2 and all these middle movies that don't quite finish out the arc. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, so I'm going to express them here. I think what works about movies like Empire Strikes Back and Back to the Future 2 that doesn't work with Across the Spider-Verse is that if you take a film like Empire Strikes Back, it's one start to finish story. It ends very open-ended, which I really like. It ends on quite a somber note. It ends with our characters not really knowing what to do next. Han is frozen in the carbonite. Luke just found out that Darth Vader's his father. Spoiler alert for Empire Strikes Back, I guess. Someone is probably going to say, why did I spoil Empire Strikes Back, one of the most famous movies ever made? So yeah, the thing about Empire Strikes Back is that it's still a start to end story. You still have Luke training to be a Jedi. He fights Vader at the end. He gets away. It ends quite somberly. There's a lot of open-ended questions. Is Han going to make it out? Is Luke going to face Vader and defeat him? And all these other questions. Can we trust Lando Calrissian? And it's excellent the way it ends, because the characters are still in a place where they have to move forward. They're not trapped. There's no to be continued. It's very much a start to finish story within a trilogy that is its own start to finish story. And you see this as well with Back to the Future 2, which actually does have a to be continued and a kind of cliffhanger ending. But Back to the Future 2 also has a start to finish story. Marty has to prevent his kid from going to jail. Biff messes up the timeline. Marty fixes it. Doc goes missing. It ends on a cliffhanger. It ends with a to be continued. But Marty McFly still knows that the Doc is alive. He still knows that he can go get him. It's still a start to finish story. Marty has fixed the timeline and now he has to go find Doc. The problem with Across the Spider-Verse being the middle part of a three-part story is that it ends very open-ended, but the ending doesn't feel like an ending to that film. It feels like a cliffhanger ending to a TV show. This kind of stuff works in TV and comic books, because with a TV show there's usually an episode out next week. With comic books, there's a new issue out in 2 weeks or a month. My problem with Across the Spider-Verse is that we're getting another film next year. With film, I find that you need to be able to watch a film on its own. Any film you can put on, I can put on Empire Strikes Back, watch it start to finish. That's one film, it's great. I can watch Back to the Future 2 and watch it from start to finish. That's great. The Dark Knight, you can watch it from start to finish, it's great. With Across the Spider-Verse, I think the best way to say it really is to tell you a bit about my theatre experience. While it was horrible, there is one thing that I had to agree with my fellow audience members about. When it ended and it just smashed to be continued, everyone in the cinema groaned and got up and left. It seemed that they kind of hated it. And while it can be I'm going to have to go see the next one and that's great and I'm hyped, I got the sense that a lot of people around me felt kind of cheated, that they hadn't paid for a full film. And if I were to offer a solution to this, I would say cut the last 10 or so minutes out of the film. I think if they had Miles go to the wrong universe, figure out that he's in the wrong universe, and then just before he gets knocked out by Aaron and meets his other self, that's when you cut to the end. Miles is in the wrong universe. Gwen can still have set up her spider team to go get him. So you still end on a twist. It's still the middle part of a three-part story. but there's still an element of closure there. You have not started a new story and then cut it halfway through. So that's just my 2 cents on that. That was a long rant. Just to explain my thoughts in more of a spoiler fashion when it comes to my negatives that I mentioned in the spoiler-free section, I find that when Gwen opened her arc, it was very, very good. I loved the first 10 to 15 minutes when she's fighting Vulture. The animation on that Renaissance-style Vulture is amazing. The problem is, Gwen kind of gets left by the wayside in favor of Miles' story. She begins to just serve Miles' story. When the film opened, I thought that this was going to be a very Gwen-focused movie, which I was very excited for, actually. I found that focusing on Miles in the first film, and then maybe focusing on Gwen in the second, and then another character, maybe Miguel or Peter B. Parker in the third film, was a really interesting way of doing it. But instead you have a story focused on Gwen, and then we focus on Miles for like an hour, and then we focus on Miguel for like 5 minutes, and then we focus on Miles at the end, and that's it. I found the pacing to be really choppy. I think if we'd included a scene, maybe in the middle or somewhere, where Gwen maybe confesses more to Miles about her difficulty revealing herself to her father and her difficulty dealing with that, maybe it would have been a little better. But it seems that a lot of it is just Gwen servicing Miles' story, and then at the very end she comes back and completes her arc in like 2 seconds, where she reveals herself to her father, and then she's all better. I don't know, it didn't feel earned to me when she completed her arc at the end. And I know that this is the second part of a 3-part story, but again, self-contained arcs, they need to be done well in this movie. I shouldn't want to have to wait like a year for the next movie to feel satisfied with this one. My biggest issue when it comes to this, though, is with the Spot. He opened, and I found him to be a very compelling villain. I love the idea that he is a joke villain, very Kite Man-esque in the sense that he's a joke villain who's actually given a lot of personal stuff and has a real deep connection to Miles. I found that to be really interesting. But then after the stuff with the Collider, he just kind of disappears, and he's kind of just like this looming threat, which he isn't really. He's completely forgotten about when Miles confronts Miguel, and they have that whole thing for like 45 minutes. And then just at the very end, we're like, oh yeah, the Spot's gonna like destroy the universe or whatever, so we gotta go deal with that. I don't know, the Spot started out really, really good, and then they just completely forgot about him, and I wanted to focus on him more. I think if this film was maybe a little less bloated, with having to deal with Miguel, and then the Spot, and then Gwen, and then Miles, and then everyone else, if it was maybe just a little bit smaller scale, in terms of its story and characters and themes, we could have had a really interesting story between Miles and the Spot. Thankfully, that is it for my negatives. The rest of this video is going to be very positive, I promise. Because there's a lot of spoiler stuff that I want to talk about that I absolutely loved and made me very, very happy. I love the themes in this movie. I don't think it's handled very well in terms of pacing, but the theme itself is so good about choice and destiny and what should happen and what you can do to prevent something from happening. I love the idea of canon events. I don't like the name canon event. It feels really meta in a bad way, in like a look, we know the internet kind of way. I would prefer if it was given a cooler name, like in the Flash TV show, they call them fixed points. I like that. But that's nitpicking at that point. I like the idea of canon events. I like the idea that in every universe with a Spider-Man, Uncle Ben has to die, Gwen Stacy's dad has to die, this has to happen, this has to happen, this has to happen. And I like the idea that Miles is breaking free from that. I like the idea that Miles is a character that is separate from every other Spider person. I find that to be really interesting because that's kind of the way he is in the comic books as well, as far as I know. I've not read any Miles Morales comic books because I'm mostly a DC guy, but from what I understand, Miles in the comic books was made as a departure from Peter Parker in pretty much every way. It seems to me that Miles was invented as a departure from Peter Parker in pretty much every way. He was meant to be a different character altogether, and Across the Spider-Verse does explore that. Miles is technically an aberration. He is a mistake. But that can be a good thing. It can be a good thing that Miles doesn't have to conform to the Uncle Ben dies, Gwen Stacy's dad dies. Maybe he doesn't have to hit these specific story beats. Maybe these events don't have to happen to him in order for him to lead a good life and be a good Spider-Man. I also love the point that Miguel makes, though, in that sometimes things need to happen in order to make you who you are. It's the choice versus destiny thing, nature versus nurture. Do these things have to happen? Do these canon events need to happen in order for the world to be okay? In order for Miles to be the best Spider-Man that he can be? This is what I love about this movie. There is so much nuance to this movie, and it's so fun to think and talk about when it comes to which one of these characters is right. Should Miles do everything in his power to save everybody that he can? Or is it better that these events do happen in order to make the world better? I think this theme is very much summed up as well in a line which I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't quite remember. It's in the trailer, or I think it's in the trailer, when Miguel is screaming at Miles. He's really harsh on Miles, by the way. Miguel is like, dude, chill. it's okay. But then again, I have heard the argument as well that Miguel has a lot on his plate because he has to deal with like 200 little fucking nerds constantly messing up the universe. I love when Miguel is screaming at Miles, telling him that this is the way it's supposed to be, you are a mistake, I need to fix this, we need to fix this. I'm paraphrasing here, but I'm pretty sure the line is, everyone's trying to tell me how my life is supposed to go, but now I'm going to do my own thing. And I am not doing that line justice by saying it like that because I am not a voice actor. Learned very quickly that that was not the life for me. I am a behind the camera kind of guy. But I do love that line. I love the way it's said by the voice actor whose name escapes me at the moment, but really good voice actor, really good Miles. I love him. But yeah, I love that line from Miles. It sums up the movie very, very well, and I got really, really hyped when I saw it. I also love the idea that Miles could have been the Prowler of his universe. I find it to be a really effective twist. Kind of wish it was saved for the opening of the next movie, but nevertheless, it's a really good twist. I like the idea that our universe Miles was supposed to be the Prowler at some point. I like the idea that when you think about it, if Miles wasn't bit by the spider in his universe, then Peter wouldn't have died and the collider wouldn't have opened and all this mess wouldn't have happened. I like the idea that there's consequences happening even in subsequent films from Into the Spider-Verse. We didn't think it was as bad as it was until this movie, and I'm sure that more will be revealed in the next movie that will recontextualize previous films for us as well. I love that. The last kind of thing I want to touch on is the various cameos and fan service in this film. We got Josh Keaton to do a line as a Spectacular Spider-Man. I could have taken or left it. It doesn't really feel like it feels like someone walked up to him and he said something and then they were like, perfect, that's the line. It seemed really strange in the movie. I don't know. It took me a second to realize, oh yeah, that's Josh Keaton. In terms of other Spider people, I liked seeing the PS4 version of Spider-Man. Love that version of Spider-Man. He's one of my favorite adaptations of the character. I love the inclusion of the 60s Spider-Man for like a half a second. I liked seeing Prowler from the MCU, played by... God, why am I so bad with names today? Donald Glover. Donald Glover, yeah. Completely wasted in the MCU. He's such a fantastic actor. Go watch Sorry to Bother You if you want to see, him really flex his acting chops. I love him. It was great to see him in a Prowler suit and actually interact. Kind of wish he had more to do in the movie, to be honest, but it's a big movie already. It was just nice to see him. I was saving these cameos for last because they mean a lot to me. Tobey Maguire will always be my Spider-Man. No one's ever going to surpass him for me. Call it nostalgia, call it whatever you want. He's my Spider-Man. And he always will be, because he's the one I related to as a kid. I used to tell people my name was Peter Parker because of Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker. I used to act like him. I used to talk like him. I used to just walk around like him, dress like him. I used to pretend I was him, and seeing him for like a brief second, I know it's just a reused shot from Spider-Man 1, but that moment, Uncle Ben's death in the first Spider-Man movie, again, and Uncle Ben will never surpass Cliff Robertson for me. He's the perfect Uncle Ben. I think it would be stupid to change that Uncle Ben. I know it's just reused footage of Uncle Ben's death from Spider-Man 1, but that really hit me hard. That death in Spider-Man 1, it'll always make me emotional and make me tear up. And just seeing that, and seeing that in a movie in 2023 where they're still paying the respect to those films that I grew up on, those films that I've loved, those films that inspired me since I can remember, it was just a beautiful thing to see. Andrew Garfield is also a Spider-Man. That means a lot to me. He was the first Spider-Man I saw in cinemas. In 2012 I went to see The Amazing Spider-Man. Also went to see The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in cinemas. Loved both of them at the time. Still kind of do, but more in the guilty kind of way. I do submit though that Amazing Spider-Man's a good movie. Amazing Spider-Man 2 not so much. But Andrew Garfield, he was not given a fair shot, and thank God they're giving him respect for his acting and the respect for his love of Spider-Man. In No Way Home, he was perfect in that. And again, it's a reused shot from The Amazing Spider-Man, but I just love the respect being paid to him and in that film, and it was just so great to see. Again, I got emotional seeing him there, especially in the situation where they're talking about how a Captain Stacy has to die in every universe. And I was kind of expecting it to happen anyway when they started talking about it, and just seeing it there, it was just so comforting to see. That's one thing, it might be my favorite thing about the Spider-Verse films, is that they pay respect to previous versions of Spider-Man. Even the ones that weren't so great, like, Andrew Garfield's movies, they still respect the good stuff that's in those films. They know the history of Spider-Man, and Lord and Miller, I couldn't respect them more for their respect for Spider-Man in every universe. So to wrap up, this film I find is a beautiful mess. The story and pacing is not great. I definitely didn't love the movie as much as I kind of wish I had. I was really hyped going in. I love Into the Spider-Verse, and this film just didn't do it for me as much in terms of its story. But I can't ignore the gorgeous animation, which might be some of the best animation ever in film. I loved the themes. I loved seeing the fan service. I think they did it really, really well. And I'm still going to go see Beyond the Spider-Verse, and I hope that this trilogy goes out with a bang. So with all that being said, let me know what you thought of Across the Spider-Verse, and don't forget to subscribe to see more videos. So if you like the video, give it a like, and if you want to see more movie reviews and discussions about film, subscribe to see more. I'm gonna get so much shit for saying these things. Okay. Get ready for the haters.